Nobody wanted to be in the Soviet Union except for Russia. It was a bardak. I mean, I call Russia Bardakistan. It's more comfortable to be isolated in your own little provincial world than to actually be part of Europe. My main message is that this is your last chance. I mean, you want to get out of this swamp known as the former Soviet Union. You've got to work hard at it. I mean, this is the bizarre thing. Moldova is a democratic country. Ukraine is a democratic country. We would fail as the European Union if we did not give you the chance to join. I am not a former Sov. You want to be called a former Sov, or do you want to be a Moldovan, a European Moldovan?
Toomas Hendrik Ilves, fost președinte al Estoniei între 2006 și 2016, fost ministru de externe, fost eurodeputat. Bine ați venit la Europa Liberă! Țara dumneavoastră, Estonia, în 1991 a fost în același punct istoric cu Republica Moldova, imediat după destrămarea Uniunii Sovietice. Dar de atunci și până în prezent, lucrurile s-au desfășurat diferit și istoria s-a scris diferit. Credeți că ar fi fost posibil pentru Republica Moldova să urmeze aceeași cale a țărilor baltice, inclusiv a Estoniei, încă după destrămarea Uniunii Sovietice sau imediat după destrămarea Uniunii Sovietice?
Well, first of all, your use of the word history is passive. History doesn't happen, you make it. So that's my first answer. So history didn't happen to us. History was what we have all, Moldova, Estonia, have lived with for a long time, and history has probably left more of an impact on us than many other people for whom, you know, in the United States, to say something is history, that means it's like nothing, whereas history is something we live with all the time. Now, one of the things that happened with us, that we did in Estonia, was that we knew the Soviet Union was going to collapse. We didn't know when, but what we did was prepare for the day that it did. So on issues such as, well, one of the issues that we need a new constitution. And so 3 weeks after we declared independence on the 20th of August, 1991, we already sat down with our constitutional convention. We knew ahead of time and had lots of arguments and academic papers, we would need our own money. So the minute we became independent, we started working on getting our own money, which we did 10 months after that. So we were prepared, and I didn't see other countries really preparing. So that's one difference. Why we prepared was that we knew and felt throughout the period in which we worked on the European Union and NATO accession was that we do not have a lot of time. That Russia is weak. In 1991, Russia is weak. It will be weak for a while, but its imperial designs and behavior is going to be there, and it's only their weakness that prevents them from doing something to us. So, we said, we have a window of opportunity. We have to use this window of opportunity. We must get into the European Union. We must get into NATO.
Ce altceva credeți că a făcut Moldova greșit în acest timp din 1991 până în prezent, încât nu s-a alăturat încă Uniunii Europene? Pe lângă faptul că nu a înțeles poate în acel moment că Uniunea Sovietică se destramă.
Historically, what happened was that Laughing Lithuania thought we were crazy, and I was crazy when I said we must focus on the European Union. So they are different paths. What happened historically in Moldova, as far as I know, is that your political leadership was unwilling to take risks. The risks of making major reforms that Estonia did very early, 1992, 93, 94, things that were not popular. The government of democratic government elected in 1992 assumed it would not be in power for long, and that we had to do things. We had to privatize, We had to sell foreign, we had to open up land sales, we had to return property. These are all things that are very difficult to do. We needed to make things which people don't think about, but I mean, repatriation of profits, 100% repatriation of profits made. We initiated a flat rate income tax, simple income tax, which led to far greater compliance and when it came to people paying taxes. These were all difficult decisions, and other countries were not willing to take those because they thought that, okay, well, we'll get there, we'll reform, we'll do something, but right now let's enjoy the fact that now we can drive a Mercedes, not a Volga.
Țara dumneavoastră, Estonia, a fost prima din țările ex-sovietice care a început negocierile de aderare și care a început această discuție serioasă despre a deveni parte a Uniunii Europene. Însă, în acel moment, dacă înțelegem bine, în societatea estoniană mai existau încă discuții despre faptul că, sau rezerve mai degrabă, că Estonia abia a părăsit o Uniune și se grăbește să intre într-o altă Uniune, adică abia părăsise Uniunea Sovietică, încerca să intre în Uniunea Europeană. Cât de justificate au fost atunci acele temeri ale estonienilor?
Well, point one, never confuse the Soviet Union with the European Union simply because it has the name union in common. It is a union in Russian or in Soviet terminology is a perversion. It is a perversion of everything that the word implies, and the European Union is an organization of democracies that are voluntarily there and that want to be there. Nobody wanted to be in the Soviet Union except for Russia. So anyway, we did not have that big a problem about going into the European Union. At least not among Estonians. I mean, there were some people who were opposed because of because of preconceived notions about what it was like. And one big issue is being afraid of competition. It's more comfortable to be isolated in your own little provincial world than to actually be part of Europe. And to be able to freely travel to Europe, to be able to work, to have people from Europe come to Estonia. That was a large part of the work we had to do in Estonia, was to convince people that this was a worthwhile thing to do. And that requires every country that joins the European Union has to convince its population that it's worthwhile doing. Now, on the other hand, just so you don't have there is this, I don't know if I can use this term, but there is this teleology of joining the European Union, meaning that it was always meant to be. That's where we were going. No. As I said in my talk today here, I mean, not here, but in
Chisinau.
Well, in Chisinau, we had countries that did not want us in the European Union, precisely because we were so-called former Soviets. Germany was strictly opposed to Estonia ever joining the European Union. People didn't want us. I mean, you're in a much better position in Moldova today than we were in 1996-97. Was that there were countries in the EU that did not want to take us. Our job was to prove that we were at least as good, if not better, than the countries that were going to join anyway. So Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic were going to join because they met all the criteria. But we had Germany opposed to our membership, which meant we had to prove that we were at least as good as Poland or Hungary or the Czech Republic. And that took a lot of work, and that work we had to do at home.
It was a hard work for your country?
Very hard work, and I say all the time, I was minister for 6 years, and they were the hardest 6 years of my life, and that I aged probably 12 years in 6. It was 6 years of working 6 or 7 days a week, working from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, sometimes 10 o'clock. And it was not only me, it was the foreign ministry or the people working on negotiations in other ministries that all had to do the same, which meant, what that meant was that, on a Friday night at 10 o'clock, there was a problem. It had to be solved by Monday. So I would call someone up at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday saying, we have to get this solved by Monday. Please get it done. And they would come into work early in the morning on a Saturday and work on it. It is not a passive thing like, oh, well, we'll get there eventually. You want to get into the EU? This is, my main message is that this is your last chance. You want to get out of this swamp known as the former Soviet Union. You've got to work hard at it. And it will be a hard road. On the other hand, if you look at Estonia's GDP per capita since we joined, it's skyrocketed. We're far wealthier than were the countries that were in the EU when we became independent. We're doing really well. And that's all thanks to not only the money we get, least of all, the money we get from the EU is because we have open markets, we have free movement of people, free movement of labor, free movement of capital. We get lots of investment. Soon as we joined the European Union, investments skyrocketed into our country. These are all the benefits.
What happens if Moldova loses this trend, this chance, this opportunity? Now, in this moment.
Okay, what happens if you don't do it? Well, then it'll be, we'll see if you get another chance. It doesn't, I would say that there was no chance for Moldova until, this is the bizarre thing. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, not in 2014, because then the Germans signed Nord Stream 2 in 2015, so that didn't make any difference. But the big major invasion of February 24th, 2022 made Europe realize that Moldova and Ukraine are strategically important to be part of the zone of free and democratic countries, and that Russia is a revanchist military power set on overturning the post-World War II understanding of no aggression against countries in Europe. And if we in Europe don't open up the possibility for Moldova and Ukraine to join, we have failed. Because we say we are Europeans living in democracy. Europeans that don't have democracy, they're not part of the European Union. Moldova is a democratic country, Ukraine is a democratic country. We would fail as the European Union if we did not give you the chance to join. It changed an attitude that existed for the past 10 years. And that attitude was, well, they don't really want to join, let them be. And that was an attitude in the European Union, and frankly, neither Moldova nor Ukraine really did much to try to join the European Union. The first evidence we had that anyone really wanted to join the European Union in this area was the Maidan of the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. When we saw suddenly that young people care about Europe enough to die for it. And when we said people are willing to die for it, well, then we better do something. And really it took off in 2022. We said we have to give Moldova and Ukraine a chance. Now, note an important part of this is that Georgia, which we thought, well, they could join someday too, their turn away from democracy, and such a clear turn away from democracy, is that country doesn't have a chance. It's not going to get into the European Union when it has a government that is anti-democratic. You have a democratic government, you have a democratically elected president, you have a very European president, and we want people like that in the EU.
În acest context de apropiere a Republicii Moldova de Uniunea Europeană, politicieni proruși din Republica Moldova invocă frecvent sperietoarea că faptul că Republica Moldova va deveni membra Uniunii Europene, asta înseamnă că va primejdui cumva independența, suveranitatea și chiar va exista un pericol pentru identitatea și limba vorbită în Republica Moldova. Ce le-ați replicat dumneavoastră acestor politicieni, judecând din experiența estonienilor?
Estonian is an official language of the European Union. Every document that the European Union has is in Estonian. I mean, our language has never been this strong. Our sense of identity in Estonia is so much stronger as a European country than it was as a former Soviet republic, where your identity is determined by an awful totalitarian past. I am not a former Sov, but as long as you're not in the European Union, you will be called a former Sov. I mean, in terms of identity, you want to be called a former Sov, or do you want to be a Moldovan, a European Moldovan? When I was in the European Parliament, I would be visited by Norway representatives all the time because Norway and Estonia were friends. And they would say, please vote this way. And I said, well, because everything the European Union does affects Norway, just as everything the European decides affects Moldova. But you don't have a say in it. Norway does not have a say in all the kinds of things that you need to do in the European Union. For an example, I mean, you want to export whatever, wine, you want to export fruits to Europe. You have to follow EU rules. Now, you're less sovereign because you have no say in those rules today. Those rules, when you're in the European Union, they say you are deciding also what those rules are. But you're going to have to live by EU rules whether you like it or not, because otherwise your economy is not going to function, because the EU is your major market. So if you want to have a say into what happens, your sovereignty is bigger in the European Union than it is out of the European Union. And right now, the situation Moldova is in, especially with 80% of your exports going to the European Union, is that you just have to follow the rules they have. When you're in the European Union, you are one of the countries making the rules.
Dumneavoastră credeți că acum țările din estul Europei și din Europa Centrală sunt mai bine auzite în Occident și în cancelariile europene din motivul sau din cauza invaziei pe care Rusia a pornit-o împotriva Ucrainei?
Look, the chief person in charge of foreign and security policy
is an Estonian.
Is an Estonian. So do you think that you would have that this would? Do you think that an Estonian would ever have any influence in Europe if we were not in the European Union? If we did not have someone there running foreign and security policy? And you see what Lavrov said. Oh no, this means the Estonianization of European politics. I mean, talk about having an influence. Now, the point with Kaja Kallas is that she is, and this is one of the things that Moldovans and everyone else always to keep in mind, is that, yeah, they're bigger countries and they have more clout. But if you are good, if you are smart, if you can make a good case, if you read more books than other people, then you will be able to do something in Europe no matter how small you are. You are twice as big as Estonia. So, I mean, we're just 1.3 million, and we are at the top of European foreign policy. That should be your goal, to have a Moldovan in charge of European foreign policy.
Țara dumneavoastră, Estonia, se învecinează cu Rusia, care a pornit acum 2 ani un război împotriva Ucrainei. Aș vrea să vă întreb dacă dumneavoastră, ca cetățean estonian, dar și ca fost președinte al Estoniei. V-a fost vreodată frică în acest interval de 2 ani că Rusia ar putea să atace Estonia?
Well, maybe the early 2000s, when Russia was turning aggressive and was more powerful than in the 90s. In the 90s, I did, they can't do it. Because they were such, it was a bardak, to use the
word.
The expression. I call Russia Bardakistan. You could not do anything. Beginning with Putin, we saw that they were getting more aggressive, nastier, but then we joined NATO, and now we're in it. That's why Finland joined NATO. It's why, after 80 years of neutrality. It's why Sweden joined NATO after 215 years of neutrality. It joined because Russia is now an aggressive, revanchist power, a revisionist power, does not follow the rules of international law, and so anything is possible with them. But I am not afraid as a member of the NATO alliance, because I know if they attack us, they attack all of NATO.
Dar credeți că este posibil ca Rusia să atace o țară NATO așa cum au spus unele voci?
They don't know what they're talking about. Whoever says that they could, theoretically everything is possible in the world, but it would be suicide. It would be suicide to attack the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's allies. That's what it's about, is to defend democracies in Europe.
Este evident de ce NATO este o opțiune sigură pentru Estonia sau clară pentru Estonia. De ce cum credeți că ar trebui să privească cetățenii Republicii Moldova sau o eventuală apartenență la NATO în contextul în care în Republica Moldova încă există voci foarte clare care sunt rezervate sau sunt contra unei aderări a Republicii Moldova la NATO sau cel puțin a unei discuții în acest sens, chiar și cu pericolul războiului din Ucraina vecină?
Look, it's your choice if you want to be in NATO. You don't have to be in NATO. Austria is not in NATO. Ireland is not in NATO. Of course, it's pretty easy for Ireland not to be in NATO, right? But I don't know. Look, Finland and Sweden were not members of NATO. They joined the European Union in 1995. So basically 30 years in the European Union without feeling a need. But then they began to feel a need. When a country and its democratically elected government decides that there is a need, then you have that discussion with your people. I wouldn't worry about it right now. Why bother? It's not in the cards.
Because the war is close, maybe. Of that.
The war is close, but look, joining NATO is your decision and the decision of NATO. Two sides. Right now, I don't see NATO being ready to enlarge to Moldova, and I don't see Moldova ready to want to go to NATO. Discuss that when you get there. I think one step at a time.
Războiul Rusiei împotriva Ucrainei a căpătat o altă turnură și după ce forțele ucrainene au intrat în regiunea rusă Kursk, ce scenarii credeți dumneavoastră că există în acest moment pentru evoluțiile acestui război și cât de aproape sau cât de departe credeți că este pacea pe continentul european?
Frankly, I don't know. If I knew what was going to happen with Ukraine, with the Kursk incursion, then I would be God, but I don't know. I think that the Kursk incursion showed that Ukraine is not a loser, and it has agency. It can do things. It is not simply the passive recipient of Russian aggression, and I think that's a very worthwhile step to remind Russia and Russians that this comes at a cost, and it improves their negotiating position. But I don't know how the war is going to end. I'm frankly one of those who is very annoyed and angry at Western partners who are not giving enough. Estonia has given 1% of its GDP, 1%, you know, it's a huge amount of money to Ukraine because we want Ukraine to be an independent country free of Russian aggression. We are committed. Some other countries aren't so committed. I mean, so I don't know how that will work. And we have the US elections coming. Who knows how those are going to go? And it depends. There are very different visions of on the part of the two candidates running for president on how to solve the Ukraine issue. Very different. So, and I don't know how the Americans are going to vote. I don't know what the election will. So, I can't predict anything. However, I can say that the commitment on the part of countries like mine to Ukraine is extremely strong, and we will continue to support Ukraine as long as we need to support Ukraine.
Cum vă imaginați relația Uniunii Europene cu Rusia după ce se va fi încheiat războiul?
Well, I don't know. My preferred outcome is that there are no relations really with Russia until the war criminals responsible for the war and for the atrocities such as Bucha are in The Hague, number one. B, that Russia pays reparations for all the damage it's done. And after that, we'll see how it goes. But before that, I do not see any reason even to lift sanctions.
Politicienii și guvernarea de la Chișinău vorbesc frecvent despre faptul că Federația Rusă poartă împotriva Republicii Moldova un război hibrid și politicienii din Estonia au vorbit despre aceste astfel de amenințări. Aș vrea să vă rog să ne explicați din perspectiva dumneavoastră ce este de fapt acest război hibrid despre care oamenii aud vorbindu-se tot mai des în Republica Moldova și cum l-ați descrie dumneavoastră?
The only thing that's hard about hybrid war is what is your response, because with a military incursion, you fight back. But what do you do if there's sabotage? What do you do with disinformation? And it's not only Estonia and Moldova that disinformation, this sabotage, it goes on in all EU member states today. We have the Russians wanted to assassinate the German head of Rheinmetall, the largest producer of weapons in Germany. They're killing people in Europe. So we know. It's not something you can't touch. We know people have been killed. The real question with hybrid war is, what do you do back? What do you do? What is your response? And here there has been no real answer yet. I suspect if they keep doing this, there will be an answer. The disinformation about Moldova is not only in Moldova. They are spreading disinformation about you all across Europe. We saw this with Ukraine already with the association agreement referendum in the Netherlands in 2013. There had never been a referendum on an association agreement, ever. It's an absurd thing to have a referendum on, but they've got, because of Dutch law, they got to be a referendum, and then they poured disinformation into the Netherlands about how bad Ukraine was, and the Netherlands voted against an association agreement. It's a completely insane thing to do. So you can count on Russia spreading disinformation about your country, not only here, but all over Europe. And that's why you need to have a strong response abroad as well as domestically. Now, domestically, what you need to do, I would say, is don't just count on the government. You don't need to go into censorship. What you need is transparency about disinformation so everyone knows this is a clear lie. What Estonia and also Latvia and Lithuania and now also Finland and Sweden have done is that we have non-governmental organizations, civil society, monitors and follows closely what the Russians are saying and then exposes it. gives it to the press. We know we don't have enough people for the government to follow. What are they saying now? We have people who do it, who volunteer to do it, and we're happy to have Moldovans come into Estonia and probably for Latvia and Lithuania too to see how we do it. It's quite effective because they don't really, as soon as they have one of these false narratives, we expose it.
Ce avantajează, de exemplu, Estonia, care este de ani de zile membra Uniunii Europene și a NATO, dacă vorbim de instrumentarul cu care ar putea să combată războiul hibrid, în comparație cu Republica Moldova, care încă nu face parte din UE și NATO și, respectiv, nu e pusă, poate, mai la adăpost de aceste amenințări hibride?
I would say, NATO doesn't help us on a hybrid war. NATO has organizations that there are parts of NATO. There's a cyber defense center. There is a strategic communications center. Their mandate is only to deal with disinformation or cyber attacks against NATO, not against Estonia, not against Germany. That is up to the individual nation state. So it is up to us. It is our commitment to fight disinformation that we do so. We're not getting help from NATO for that. It is our own efforts. And that's here, Moldova is no different from Estonia. It is our own efforts. It is your own efforts. We're not getting anything from NATO.
Este posibil ca un guvern să lupte împotriva influenței ruse, inclusiv împotriva unor agenți care sunt cunoscuți, de exemplu, în Republica Moldova ca actori din coloana a 5-a și în același timp să respecte toate normele democratice? Sau în astfel de cazuri este permis să se încalce un pic regulile, pentru că se trăiesc timpuri de criză, așa cum spun politicienii?
No, that's the whole point. If you want to be a European democracy, then you follow the rules of European democracy, and that makes life harder. But that's the whole point, is that democracy is not easy, and you have to follow norms, and you have to respect the rules. But it's more important to do that than stay a democracy than to allow the possibility of turning into an authoritarian state. We see a country like Hungary departing from the norms of democracy, and this makes and they're in the European Union, but they're not following the rules. And I'm not sure about the future of Hungary in the European Union, precisely because they are not following the rules. You want to be in the European Union, you have to follow the rules, and that does make it harder, right? No extraordinary methods against anyone, but that's too bad. That's the way we have to live. That's why we like democracy.
Credeți că nostalgia unor persoane după Uniunea Sovietică este folosită de Rusia în războiul hibrid pe care îl poartă împotriva mai multor țări și cum poate fi combătută această nostalgie?
I don't know. How can you feel nostalgia for the Soviet Union? It was like a pit, a hole, disgusting. It is a bardak. And it remains a bardak, Why would anyone feel nostalgia for living in a country that is being poor, no rights? Of course, if you just think that life is about putting your hand out and say, give me money, that's a serf mentality. We don't want to be serfs. We're not waiting for the feudal lord or the kolkhoz chairman to give us potatoes. No, we want to work hard. We want to save our money. We want to drive and have to Europe and have a vacation on the Mediterranean. That's what we want. We don't want to live in a kolkhoz of a world.
Ilves, thank you for your time and for being here at Radio Free Europe.
It was my honor and pleasure to work for Radio Free Europe from 1984 to 1993. It was, if I said the hardest time of my life was being foreign minister, I would say the best time of my life was working at Radio Free Europe in those years because I was making my country free and it worked.
Aceasta este podcastul video Pe Agendă, cu ediție nouă în fiecare zi de miercuri. Îl puteți găsi pe pagina de internet a Europei Libere, moldova.europalibera.org, dar și pe canalul de YouTube al Europei Libere, unde vă puteți abona la Pe Agendă ca să nu ratați nicio ediție nouă, pentru că aici încercăm să găsim răspunsuri la întrebările care contează pentru dumneavoastră.